Hello and good afternoon. I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Immigration and Data Security, How to Reduce Vulnerabilities with Your Data. I have no idea where the month of April went, but this is our second to last webinar of the month, and we're so happy that everyone could be on the line listening in. A reminder that today's session will last about 45 minutes, and that includes audience question and answer. We encourage you to ask questions, and we'll try to get to them at the end of the main presentation. If you would like to ask a question, please do so using the question function that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. Okay, so for nearly 20 years, Envoy has been on a mission to fix the frustrating, confusing, and inefficient immigration process. Envoy combines expert legal representation with innovative technology to deliver the only platform that makes it seamless for companies to hire, mobilize, and manage a global workforce. Envoy secures work authorization in 150 plus countries, has grown 46% year to date, and works with over 1,000 customers. We're particularly proud of our NPS score, which is a testament to the employee experience that we provide. And introducing today's presenters, I'd like to welcome Mary McGuire from Envoy Global and Gordy Rosoclia, a managing attorney at Global Immigration Associates. Mary and Gordy, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having us. Hello, everybody.
Thanks.
All right, so as we take a brief look at today's agenda, broken up in about three core sections. And then, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, we'll end things with a question and answer session. So again, if you have a question, please ask it using the question function that you see, and we'll try to get to that at the end or in the middle of the presentation. Okay, so with that, let's hop into things. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, legal disclaimer here. Content in this presentation is not intended as legal advice, nor should be relied upon as such. If you have additional questions or for additional information, consult with a qualified attorney. Okay, now let's hop into things. Starting with Data Security 101. All right, so I'd just like to set the scene a little bit and talk about the threat that's out there. These stats are from a recent report, the 2018 Cost of Data Breach Security, which was a joint research study from IBM Security and Ponemon Institute. So if you take a look at your screen, you'll see that 48% of data breaches are caused by malicious or criminal attack, and the average cost of a data breach is approximately $3.86 million. And the mean time to contain a data breach is 69 days. So what does this mean? Well, unfortunately, that there are bad actors out there, and they're trying to steal some important data, and that includes immigration data. Well, what kind of data are we talking about when we talk about immigration data? Obviously, personal employer information, and that sometimes includes dependent info, company information, as well as financial information. As such, data security is a high priority for companies, and companies are making the investments to reduce the vulnerabilities. And as we further move along, why are these companies making such investments? Well, as we see on this slide, 46% of employers say they're confident in the security of their company's immigration data in 2019. And as you take a look, this is it appears that the confidence in the level of security of immigration appears to be declining from 2018 to 2019. In 2018, this was 59%. And in 2019, 46%. So less than half of employers say they're very confident in the security of their company's immigration data. And these numbers are from Envoy's 2019 Immigration Trends Report, which surveyed just over 400 HR professionals. And another stat that I would like to share with our audience is, if we take a look here, despite the importance of data security, only 13% of employers have started to require their immigration partners to increase their data security measures. Other numbers worth noting are 49% of respondents said they are making investments to increase our data security. 33% are requesting immigration service providers to increase their security, become compliant with local laws like GDPR. And then that 13% are we will require. And then 5% are not making any changes. One second here. So, as such, immigration has become a C-level concern. By extension, data security should also be a C-level concern. Now, let's examine the role of technology and how it can protect immigration data. And this is where I'm going to loop in Mary McGuire, and we can discuss some of these key features. So let's start first with two-factor authentication, which is sometimes also known as multi-factor authentication. Requiring a second level of authentication protects accounts from unauthorized access. So I just want to provide a brief overview on how that works. So imagine, for instance, you sign on, you'll be prompted to enter a code that you receive on your mobile device. This can be either a text message or a random number generated from an authenticator app. So for instance, I personally use two-factor authentication on things such as my Google account, social media, and they're all hooked to what I use is the Google Authenticator app. So every time I log in, I get a number and I input that randomly generated number. Another one is also Microsoft Authenticator. So this also applies if you're looking for an immigration services provider. Mary, I think you would agree that our attendees should look for this key feature. So my question for you is just how easy it is for HR teams to set up two-factor authentication.
Perfect. Yeah, and like you said, Eric, it's two-factor or multi-factor, even better if you go above kind of the initial two, is really, really important to kind of keeping not only your information secure, but your employees' information secure. In a lot of the consumer-driven applications, as Eric mentioned, like social media accounts, Amazon, Google, a lot of those, it's really easy. It's something that people are looking for when they're trusting applications and sites with their information. And so a lot of the big players like Instagram, Facebook, all of those have stepped up. And it's typically just something under settings, and you go under, privacy or security and get that set up. There's a lot of, corporate or, applications such as Slack and Dropbox and all of those that are used within organizations as well that have it easily available setting up under settings as well. And then, as Eric mentioned too, there's kind of those umbrella, kind of ways that you can set up the two-factor or the multi-factor levels of security. One thing to look for in particular is, there's kind of two-step security and then there's two-factor or multi-factor. The main difference is that kind of that multi-factor is really trying to come at it from multiple angles. So the two-step is what we all kind of know as like the security question. So it's a couple of things that that you can answer, but it's also something that someone trying to hack your information could easily know as well. Whereas the multi-factor is taking kind of three different things into account. It's taking something which could be a password. It's taking something you are, which could be a fingerprint, or retina scan if you're that advanced, or something you have, like a phone or some sort of external device. So just one thing to look for is to kind of look for that multi-factor or two-factor and not just kind of the two-step. Right.
If you're using it to protect your, like you mentioned, like Dropbox or cloud files like that, then you should be using it to protect your immigration data.
Absolutely, yes.
So that's one of the neat features that you should look for. Another one is cloud storage, and we have two examples here. So Mary, let's first touch on the uploading secure documents. So obviously with employment-based visas, foreign nationals and employers are filling out a lot of documents, sensitive documents. So what kind of documents can be uploaded to an immigration service provider?
A great point, Eric. If you think about it, all of the most sensitive information that you have is all of the information that's needed for the immigration process. So if you're talking about your passport, your diploma, your resume, and then getting into I-94s, your birth certificate, prior petition. So pretty much any documents or files that have any sensitive information about you or your employees, it's kind of part of the immigration process. So you want to look for a system that can secure those in a way that only the employee and the HR professional or HR has access to those.
Gotcha. And what are the benefits of uploading in a secure cloud environment versus, for instance, having these forms in a file cabinet?
So if you think about the traditional way that we've stored a lot of these is, locked up in file cabinets throughout the office. But with any sort of, kind of physical storage, there's always that they could be left open, they could be left unlocked. The person who has the key, leaves the company, and now someone's breaking in to get access to them because you need access to them, and now everybody has access to them. They're easy to duplicate. If you've got a physical copy of something, it's easy to take a picture or scan it or copy it. And there's also the risk of, if it's something that you want to keep on file, there's the risk of, fire damage or, just the documents being damaged. Whereas if they are stored in the cloud, they are secure, they're safe, they're, behind firewalls. If you think about, I always used to, when I travel, email copies of my passport to myself in case I happen to lose my passport, which is great, but it's also not very secure. You're keeping, copies of my passport within an email. Whereas something like this, something where you have your documents in a cloud storage system, if you're abroad and you happen to lose your passport, you can access that secure site and access your personal information without having it in your email.
Definitely. Gordy, I wanted to loop you in here. So some of these important files, one of them known as public access files. We'll go into a little bit more on that in a little bit in this presentation, but I just want to hear your thoughts on the benefits of uploading public access files into a secure cloud environment.
Yeah, definitely. So those are maybe the two most important document retention requirements, and a lot of people ask those questions of, how long do we have to keep the public access file? How long do we have to keep a perm audit file? The answer is that the public access file has to be kept for 1 year from the date that the employee stops working. And if there's not someone who is employed under that LCA, it has to be kept for 1 year from the date that the LCA expires. In other words, the perm audit files, those have to be kept for 5 years from the date of the perm submission. So intuitively, and you guys have been having this discussion in terms of maintaining that. Legally, the Department of Labor does permit all that to be stored electronically, and so to us and maybe to many practitioners, it makes a lot of sense to have all that digitally stored as opposed to having physical files like laying around an office and not sure how to pull and access the data. And so this is really becoming very important because there's so many changes in terms of not only the review standard at USCIS, but the various, for example, filing H-1B amendment cases. Like the standard is much more strict now in terms of someone's changing work locations or there's a material change in the terms and conditions of employment. There has to be an amendment case filed, and for that there has to be a new public access file. So yeah, I think within the broader scope of the USCIS requirements and everything that goes into it, these retention requirements are becoming more important, and it's good to have something to be able to streamline everything and secure.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thanks for that perspective. And then as we kind of move along here, two more features that additional key features to look for from your immigration services provider. The first one, single sign-on authentication. So Mary, can you talk a little bit about the single sign-on authentication, and how does this differ from multi-factor authentication?
Sure. So anyone not necessarily familiar with it, as the name suggests, single sign-on or SSO as it's commonly referred to, requires the end user to only sign in once to gain access to multiple applications or services. So an example is you log on to Windows, you log on to your laptop, and then through that authentication, you don't have to log into Outlook, or you don't have to log into certain other corporate approved applications that have been set up. So essentially, SSO allows you to kind of create a master sign-in to authenticate the user's credentials, and then it stores it to perform logins on the user's behalf throughout independent applications and systems within a certain domain. By storing the user's credentials, and then it'll use it in different manner to log into the different applications at each login, so it avoids the user themselves having to authenticate each time. So the biggest benefit of SSO is kind of that user experience. So you're kind of you're not reducing security at all, but you're kind of taking that need to kind of do the multiple layers of security away from the user, so the user can log in faster, but you're not reducing security. So they're different, but quite frankly, best practice is to use them both together. So if you're using SSO, you're making things easier for your users, but also have that multi-factor on the back end so that you can ensure that the data is still secure.
Gotcha. And then another one is our sophisticated firewalls to safeguard employee and company data as well. Additionally, additional features to look for from an immigration services provider are certifications. And these are just some examples. Big ones being the GDPR compliance. We've all heard it. It's been in effect for, I believe, a little bit over a year now. Privacy Shield framework. So just ensuring that your immigration service provider has the latest certifications.
And with these, the nice thing about these is it's taking the guesswork out of it for you. So when you choose to partner with certain vendors, you don't need to think, oh, what should I be looking for? When you see these certifications, it really shows, okay, they've gone through kind of the audit of, checking the boxes of meeting certain requirements and meeting those requirements. So they're nice badges to see when you're working with a vendor.
Exactly. So we're going to wrap up this particular section. Gordy, I'm going to loop you in here. I know you've been sitting on the sidelines. So immigration and compliance. So can you talk about some prominent compliance issues around immigration today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the discussion that we've been having in terms of why retention and document retention and privacy and those types of issues are so prominent today is in large part because USCIS has made the review standard and everything that goes into case filings and labor condition filings more prominent than it was in the past. So these issues, these compliance issues that were mentioned, a lot of them stem from the new guidance from USCIS, for example, in terms of when to file an H-1B amendment case. And so that in turn triggers a need to create a new public access file. So these are, perm audits, for example. So the Department of Labor, they generally say that the percentage of cases that get that get audited stays relatively similar, but sometimes there's upswings, there's downswings. Sometimes they have more workers in place. And so those are the two key things for employers to know is that for the public access file, it's 1 year from the date that the employee stops working for you, and from the perm audit file, it's 5 years from the date that the perm application is submitted. Certainly, there's been ICE inspections, there's more scrutiny being given to I-9. One example that I can think of is for companies that employ workers off-site, the new version of the labor conditions application now says that you have to state who the end client is. So if the company filing the LCA is company A, but the person is being staffed at company B, you have to list that on the LCA, in terms of the work site. So a lot of those, different triggers are in place in making sure that everything is in place in terms of the public access file and the perm audit file.
Okay. So you've been mentioning public access files. Can you talk about, a little bit more about what a public access file is and why it's important to securely store them?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first, point that I wanted to mention is, the Department of Labor, their guidance, very clear presently that these items can be stored electronically. So that's a very important distinction to make. And so, in terms of which case types this generally, is required, it's any case types that would require an LCA filing. So those would be H-1B cases, of course, H-1B1, which is very similar to an H-1B, but it's for citizens of Singapore and Chile, and then the E-3, that's for citizens of Australia. So all three of those case types, they require labor condition application filing with the Department of Labor, and that in turn requires a public access file to be maintained based on the worker being placed at that specific work site.
Gotcha. And can you go talk about a little bit more about the content of the public access file?
Yeah, absolutely. So the key points that the Department of Labor, they want to see, this list mentions, the items to have. Number one, they want to make sure that there's the wage data. So that's typically filed from the Foreign Labor Conditions, the online library. So that is information basically where you type in the county, the state and the county where the person's working, and then the classification for the position, whether it's a software developer application, software developer system software, market research analyst, et cetera, however it is that you're classifying that position. And then it gives the wage data, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. That's based on the seniority for that position. If it's something entry level, then it would be the level 1 wage. But these are the various things. There has to be the notice of filing, and that's something that we, of course, at Global Immigration Associates at the law firm, that we prepare on behalf of the client. It's virtually a template where the necessary information is input. And then the actual wage statement relative to how many other employees the employer employs in this type of similar roles, and what their exact salaries are, what the salary range is for the various employees who are employed in similar positions.
Great. So best practices to stay compliant. Figure we could split this one up, just kind of talk about some of our best practices here. Mary, if you want to lead the charge on this.
Yeah, so with, technology, what it primarily does for, in any aspect of our lives is automate. So in this case, it's great to have, kind of that automation when it comes to what you're needing to upload and kind of prompting you along the way. It kind of takes that guesswork out and removes that, kind of room for human error.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when you have, immigration platforms that are saying, upload this document, XYZ, we get into it a little bit later on, setting expiration dates and setting reminders and all of that, it really just kind of takes a lot of the guesswork and that room for error out, which is great.
Mm-hmm. And Gordy, obviously, as you mentioned, storing public access files in a secure online location. Any other best practices with regards to staying compliant with what we're discussing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, that's, as we've been discussing, it seems intuitively much, easier to maintain those online. Knowing that the Department of Labor permits that, it makes, sense for, whether it's, let's say, it's a human resources professional who's in charge of maintaining these files. Let's say there's a new one that comes in, then all of them are stored at, a secure location online that there's access to at all times, versus, files being shifted from one person to another, something being lost, et cetera. And so I do think that it's a very good feature for the Envoy platform to track that and to also notify the employers when something may be missing, and ensuring that the public access files are 100% compliant. So to me, yeah, I think this is very helpful and very useful in terms of ensuring compliance for the employer, and that makes even more sense today given the heightened review standard at USCIS and at the Department of Labor.
Definitely. So as we transition into the final section, I think it lines up with something, Mary, that you brought up, human element. So we've been talking a lot about the tech aspects of it and how that can help protect immigration documents, data, and everything. But there's still the human element that you have to account for. So while technology can be a boost to your security efforts, again, you have to account for your workforce. What does this mean? Well, typically, and Mary, feel free to hop in here, but so we see HR departments are broken down into various levels. So ensuring that they have access only to the data that they need. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so if you think about it, especially platforms like, immigration platforms, but, a lot of corporate platforms, HR, has kind of their needs and what they need to get in and look at and what they need to work on. And then there's always the, kind of the employee as well and what they need to work on. Well, employees don't need to see other employees' information, but HR will need to see everybody's information. Finance would be able to, or they would need to see, kind of the numbers. They need to see what budgets are looking like, what end of year reports are looking like, but quite frankly, they don't need to see any employee information. So it's really just kind of making sure that you think about what is it about the system, to kind of take into account that, as you talked about, Eric, kind of that human layer of making sure that the employees are taken care of and that they're feeling safe with how their information is being used. And so, yes, a lot of platforms will have kind of the different user types based on the role, and that, kind of limits the functionality that they have and what they, kind of need to be doing within the system. But just, one thing to look at is to make sure that any vendors that you're working with or any applications that you're using take into account who has access to the information. So, in a real life example is when you go to the doctor, you see one doctor for one thing, and you wouldn't want certain people having access to that information, even though they're all part of, the same, hospital network or something.
Yeah.
So just making sure that only the people that need access to the information have access to it.
Exactly. And then, again, some other risks that you have to remind your workforce about. We hear these phrases a lot: phishing, unauthorized users, and poor passwords. So again, just reiterates that while the tech is, look for tech features that can protect documents as well. Don't also remind yourself about the workforce, as Mary just mentioned. So that's going to wrap up the main presentation, and we've started getting quite a few good questions, and we're going to get to those. Cordy, I think the first one here, can you please repeat the retention requirements with regards to public access files?
Yeah, absolutely. So for public access files, it is 1 year from the date that the employee stops working for the employer, or if it's a situation, let's say, where you file an LCA and perhaps you file an H-1B petition, but the employee never joins the employer, it's 1 year from the end date of the LCA. So 1 year from the date that the employee stops working for the employer, or if not, 1 year from the date, if the employee never joins that employer, it's 1 year from the date that the LCA expires. And then for perm audit files, it's much easier, just 5 years from the date that the perm is filed.
Gotcha. And then next question here is, if the Department of Labor would come on site looking to audit the public access file, how would they have access to the public access file stored online?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess today, we've been speaking about the Envoy platform, and so what that permits is that, there's account information, there's an ability to log in. And so it's not just, one person. Let's say there's, a change in the human resources structure and there's a new then that person, would have the ability, to be authorized by the company to log into the Envoy platform and access those files. So that's typically how it works in terms of online retention, and the Department of Labor has explicitly stated that this is, permissible. And so that's why it seems to me, and that's the way that things are trending in terms of employers wanting to store all of this online, because, it can be accessed, at any time by a representative of the employer. And then there are those tracking tools that allow you to know, okay, what's missing? Okay, the actual wage statement is missing. Okay, there is the wage data perhaps is missing, the completed LCA posting notice, things of that nature. So it's able to notify you, okay, you're 100% compliant, or there are these items that need to be added on.
Gotcha. Great. So we'll wait for a couple more questions to come in. Again, if you have a question you'd like to ask Mary or Gordy, please type it in the question function that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. As we wait for more questions, I just want to go over a few end of webinar housekeeping things here. We have one more webinar this Thursday, 1 o'clock, from employment-based visa to citizenship. Look at how foreign workers can become citizens. Very excited for this one. Hope you can join us for that. Additionally, next month we are hosting a half-day event out in San Francisco, the Global Talent Symposium, where you'll hear from some exciting speakers. This half-day event, you'll learn more, you'll be able to network, learn more about the future of work and global talent. Please visit the website here. It'll link when you get this recording tomorrow, and to request a ticket. And let's see, here we go. Everyone who is currently in attendance, we got some continuing education credits here, SHRM and HRCI. So we got a couple more questions that are rolling in. So I'll leave this up and everyone can copy it. These will also be emailed out tomorrow in the follow-up email. Okay. All right. So we're getting quite a few questions here. Mary, I'll start with this question's for you. So one of the features we talked about was uploading documents, and the assumption is from a desktop platform. This question is, though, is it possible to upload documents from a mobile device? Let's say I have an employee traveling. Can he or she securely upload documents while on the go?
Great question. Speaking specifically for the Envoy platform, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, that's just kind of the way that our, society is going. I still remember the first time that I found out that you could deposit a check just by taking a picture of it from your phone, that you didn't actually have to go to a bank and insert, the check or give the physical check to anyone. My mind was absolutely blown. But, that's just kind of how we become. We're just used to being able to do everything on the go. And similar to what I said before, where if you're traveling, you need to access that information, you should be able to upload information via your mobile phone as well. It makes things easier. It keeps things moving. It's easier for Gordy and his team to stay on their timelines if employees are able to access or upload information from anywhere. So absolutely, that's something that you can do within our system, and something that I think you should look for within the immigration platform.
Gotcha. Gordy, this next question's for you. Can we share a copy of the LCA document with the employee if requested?
Absolutely, yeah. And not only that, there's also a requirement within the DOL that the employee have access to the LCA within the first business day that they start working. And so that's one of the things that, within the Envoy platform as well, like that item, can be shared with the employee. And so that's, an important part of the compliance function and understanding that. So yeah, absolutely, that's definitely permissible and in fact required by the Department of Labor.
Gotcha. All right, well, I think that's gonna end things for today, ending about 9 minutes early, give everyone back 9 minutes. Mary, Gordy, thank you so much for joining us on today's presentation. As a reminder, this recording will be emailed out, as well as a slide deck to everyone. So please keep an eye out on your email inboxes tomorrow for the links to download. And again, the SHRM and HRCI credits will also be included in tomorrow's email. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Hope to see everyone Thursday, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.